Today we want to discuss English Paper 1, the main areas that come in English Paper 1 and how students are expected to approach this paper. So if you look at English Paper 1, mostly you are tested on three major areas, and the first area is the functional writing, the second area is the closed test, then the third area is the oral skills. Let's start with the oral skills, perhaps to get a glimpse of what is expected of a candidate to do in exam. First of all, you have to understand the meaning of oral skills, and maybe I can use a layman's language in explaining the meaning of oral skills. So oral skills is just basically passing of information from one speaker to the audience and vice versa. Passing of information from one speaker to the audience and vice versa. That means that in oral skills, we are testing communication. Information being passed from one person to the other, either verbally or non-verbally. When I talk about either verbally or non-verbally, I'm referring to all paralinguistic aspects. Now, there are areas in oral skills that a student must prepare on before facing a national examination, and in this case, I'm referring to the KCSE, Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education. Number one, a student must understand the meaning of oral poems and also oral narratives. Examples of oral poems, examples of oral narratives, features of oral poems, features of oral narratives. That is the first thing that you must know as a student. The second thing that you must know as a student is pronunciation. Pronunciation. Maybe you can stroke it with stress. The third thing that you have to know as a student is etiquette. Etiquette. Then the fourth thing that you must know is mastery of content. Mastery of content. Then lastly, we look at the short forms of oral literature. The short forms of oral literature. Now, let's start with the first one. Remember, we are still discussing oral skills, areas that come in oral skills in exam. And you've said the first one is oral poem, oral narratives, pronunciation, stress, etiquette, mastery of content, short forms of oral literature. So you're beginning with oral narratives and oral poems. I'm combining the two because the distinction is so minimal. Expect for a few questions that might appear in oral narratives and not in oral poems, that might appear in oral poems and not in oral narratives. So when you're discussing, for example, oral poems, you must be competent in discussing rhyming words and rhyme scheme. Rhyming words and rhyme scheme. You must also be competent in discussing sound features. You must also be competent in tackling questions that ask you how to say, read, stroke, perform a line, either in oral poem or perform a line or a paragraph in an oral narrative. That means that we are looking at the sound produced and the paralinguistic ability. Those are the two areas when you're discussing how to say, read, or perform a line. We're looking at the sounds produced and the paralinguistic features. Next, we have the word stress and why. You can be asked an exam, which words will you stress in this line of an oral poem? Which words will you stress in this line of an oral narrative? So words to stress and the reasons why. Remember, just to give you a small overview of what this question entails, that in every sentence there are two types of words. We have content words and we have structural words. Content words, they carry the content, they carry the message, the theme of that line or a paragraph. And when you talk about structural words, they help in building and connecting the content words. So once you realize positions of content words in a poem or in a line of an oral narrative, simply say, among the reasons, I'm teaching a slow learner who does not need much content. Simply just say, I will stress good, better, best, for example. Then say, because they are content words. We'll be looking at this question in another lesson where we'll be discussing poetry as a whole, and I'll be explaining on how to tackle. I'll be giving examples, and I'll be displaying examples over the same and examples of poems and how to tackle the same question. Next is word stress and why. Now we want to look at how to capture the attention of the audience. How to capture the attention of the audience. Remember, this question puts you in a position of the speaker. You are the speaker. So in this case, we have two sides. We have the speaker and we have the audience. Now this question is putting you in the side of the speaker. You are being asked, how will you capture the attention of the audience before maybe you give a speech, before maybe you narrate a poem, before you narrate a story. So you are put in the position of the speaker. And in this case, you must say, I would, I will. You must own the statement. You must put the statement in the first person point of view. I will, I would. So that's the approach. We will look at the same also in a topic called poetry in the next, our next lesson. Again, we have to learn on how to know the audience is attentive or losing attentiveness. How can you tell that your audience is attentive? How can you tell that your audience is losing attention, is losing attentiveness? So those are the areas to look at under this part of oral narrative stroke oral poem. The other part is preparation before performance. How will you prepare before you narrate a story? How will you prepare before you go and give a speech? How will you prepare before you perform a poem? So these are the preparations. We shall be looking also at the aspects that we consider in terms of preparation. We are done with the part of oral narrative stroke oral poems. We now want to go to the second one where I mentioned pronunciation. Pronunciation is spelled as P-R-O-N-U. Remember, it's a U, not O-U, as most students make mistakes in writing and pronouncing this word. So under pronunciation, we consider mostly stress, homophones, intonation, sounds. And let me tell you something about sounds before I go to the last one. Mostly what is tested by the examiners are the vowel sounds. And they look at the long sounds, the short sounds, and the diphthongs. Maybe you can be asking me, why am I stressing on vowel words and not consonant vowel sounds and not consonant sounds? Consonant sounds are not mostly tested, reason being that many students come from very diverse and different dialects. We have communities where pronouncing R is a problem, is pronounced as an L, T, S. Those are examples of sounds, of letters that their sounds are pronounced differently depending on your dialect. Even in some communities, some consonant sounds might be missing. Okay, the last part of pronunciation, we look at silent letters. So silent letters are also tested under pronunciation, and we shall be looking at this also in a different topic where we'll be looking at how to know which is the silent letter in a word. I want also to look at what to stress. I had mentioned earlier. Sometimes you know there's different forms of stress. For example, you can use an aligning method, you can use the capitalization method, you can use the italic method if printed, you can use the bolding method, you can use the apostrophe where you have stressed the syllable. For example, a word like transport, transport, transport. When you underline the first syllable, trans, you read it with a rising intonation, trans. Then the unstressed part, port, is read with the falling intonation. Then it's not stressed. You read with the falling intonation. So it is transport, transport. Mommy, I need some transport to school. That means the child is asking for money. When you stress the second syllable, you put the apostrophe in between the syllables or at the end of the word. You can use bolding, whichever method you will go easy for. But in exam, it depends on the requirement of the question. So if you stress the second part, port, then in this case, we will read the first syllable trans with the falling intonation, transport, 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 transport. An action, movement from one place to another. A layman explanation, of course. Then there are cases whereby they have used a full stop in between the syllables, being asked which part of this word will you stress. Now, in this case, follow the following rules. I give only three. Stress the syllable with a long vowel sound. Stress the syllable with a long vowel sound. A verb like reproduce, reproduce, reproduce. We can stress the first part re because it has a long sound. You can stress also areas. Number two, you can stress areas where there's a diphthong. Number three, you can stress areas where they have used a suffix or a prefix. For example, a word like reproduce. The stem word is produced, but a suffix has been used re, so we stress the suffix. Consider those three methods. I've said number one, stress the syllable with the long vowel sound. If it's not there, look for a diphthong. If a diphthong is not there, look for a suffix or a prefix in that word. We shall be tackling this topic again in another episode. Next, number three, we go to etiquette. We have mentioned areas that come in oral poems to oral narrative. We have mentioned areas that come in pronunciation. We now want to look at etiquette. Under etiquette, let me use a very simple way of teaching this part to a common student. Consider the following words that are common in society. A word like thank you. Number two, sorry. Number three, excuse me. Number four, pardon. Pardon me. Number five, please sir. Please madam. Number six, greetings and responses to greetings. Good morning, good morning. How are you? I'm fine. Those respond the greetings and the responses. etc. Any conversation without what I've mentioned, it shows that there is no etiquette, and vice versa. A conversation with words like thank you, sorry, pardon me, may I interrupt, they show etiquette. They portray etiquette. But any conversation without those is a vice versa. That means in exam, just say, for example, John is conversing with Mary and John lacks etiquette. There's some shortcomings in his conversational skills. Just say, John does not say thank you to Mary. Then you illustrate. Next, you want to look at mastery of content. Number 4, mastery of content. Under mastery of content, we look at basically a few areas. Number 1, negotiation skills. Number 2, interviews. Number 3, impromptu speeches. Number 4, debate. Number 5, paying attention. Number 6, oral reports. Number 7, group discussions. Number 8, personal space, etc. So you look at those areas. How can you be a good negotiator? How do you tell if somebody has failed to display good negotiation skills? Interviews, preparation, during, after, what to do. Impromptu speeches, debates, you are the speaker, the chair of the debate. You are taking part in the debate actively, either proposing or opposing. What are your chances? What are your positions? What are you supposed to do? What are the do's and the don'ts? How to pay attention, how to tell the audience is not paying attention. Oral reports, group discussions, you are a group leader. How will you ensure that the group carries out a successful group discussion? You are part of the group, you are carrying out a group discussion. How will you participate effectively? Personal space. And maybe another area that I should mention here is stage fright. How to control, manage stage fright. How can you tell instances of stage fright? Lastly, I want to talk about short forms. Short forms, we have riddles, proverbs, puns, stroke wordplay, and also tongue twisters. These areas, one of them or two must appear in paper 1 English examination. Riddles, proverbs, puns, stroke wordplay, and tongue twisters. We are done with that part. Let me go back to the first question. The first question, that is functional writing. Under functional writing, we also must understand what is functional writing. Now, maybe I can explain the meaning of functional writing in a simple way. What is functional writing? Simply, you can just say the skills you use every day to better your life. The skills you use every day to better your life. And in the Kenyan next syllabus, there are 48 functional writings that are taught in the syllabus. Today, I'm going to give priority to a few. Letters, speeches, CV. Most of us call it a resume. Resume. Report, minutes, synopsis, book review, memo, email writing, condolence notes, thank you notes, thank you letters, condolence letters, all those, you mentioned them. So you must know the format of each and every functional writing. Before you approach your examination, you must carry out a study, an investigative study on the previous years, what was said the previous years, so that you are able to predict what might come during your year of study, sitting for the national examination. So you must know the format. format is marked. You must have good communication skills, because literally here what is happening is the examiner is testing you on your linguistic ability apart from the format. The examiner is also testing you on creativity and reality. You must be realistic. Realism comes in this area. That is the end of today's episode. In another episode, we shall be looking at close test and other aspects that we have mentioned. But before I go away, I want to mention a few areas that I had mentioned early for a recap. Remember, we are looking at English paper 1, so fact check. Topic oral skills. Oral skills carries 30 marks. You may divide oral skills into 5 sub-areas as a student. Oral poems, oral narratives. Pronunciation, intonation, silent letters, sounds. I repeat, you may divide oral skills into 5 subtopics: oral poems, oral narratives, pronunciation, intonation, silent letters, sounds. Under oral narratives, they appear mostly in exam, sometimes as a replacement of poetry, sometimes as an independent part. So a candidate must be trained on how to answer the following questions accurately, and I stress answering the questions accurately. Number 1, how to identify rhyming words. Number 2, how to describe rhyme scheme. Number 3, how to identify, illustrate, and explain the significance of sound features. Number 4, how to say or perform a line. Also, how to read a line. Number 5, words to stress in a line. Number 6, features that make an item easy to remember or recite. What features make an item? Is it either a poem or a story, whether a song? What aspects make that story, poem, easy to remember? How to capture the attention of the audience before and during the narrative. Again, how to know if your audience are attentive or losing attention. Then how to make the story interesting. How to make the story interesting. Those areas must be looked at with seriousness. Sounds. A student must always revise the long vowel sounds, the short vowel sounds, the diphthongs, and consonant sounds before you go to any exam, because they are highly examined in paper 1. Intonation. There are tips on intonation. Majorly we have falling and rising intonation, but we also have other intonation types like rising, falling intonation, falling, rising intonation. Maybe to another level you'll learn about level intonation, but let us consider rising intonation, falling intonation, rising, falling intonation, and falling, rising intonation. When did you use a falling intonation? When do you use a rising intonation? When did you use a rising falling or a falling rising intonation? For example, question tags. A question tag: John went to the river. Didn't he? John went to the river. Didn't he? You discover that in that statement there are 2 parts. We have the statement part and we have the question tag part. The first part, John went to the river, the statement. The second part, didn't he, is a question tag. There's another thing that you have to realize in the question tag. The question tag begins with an auxiliary verb, didn't. didn't. So in such a case, we start with a falling intonation because the statement is because of the first statement. Then the question tag is a question beginning with an auxiliary verb, didn't he. So we say such a statement has got a falling, rising intonation. Falling, rising intonation. But in exam, if you just say rising intonation, you score because that is the overruling intonation. We basically look at how the statement ends. It ends with the rising intonation. So in exam, you can just say the rising intonation. You can say falling, rising intonation, and please put a hyphen between the two. Falling hyphen rising intonation. Don't just say falling, rising. The word intonation must be there for you to score a mark of merit. Then maybe the last question on oral skills tests on speaking skills, where we have the dialogue, we have the debating skills, negotiation skills, telephone etiquette, turn taking, impromptu speech, lectures, interview skills, agreeing and disagreeing politely. So those are the main areas that we wanted to look at in paper 1. And those are the key areas that you must revise when you're waiting or preparing for your examination. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening. I'm your teacher, Mr. Saleh Elijah Amshinda Waldegard. My contact are 07 12 8 9 5 400 or 07 16 38 93 43 or 07 18 072 725. I repeat, 07 128 95 400 or 07 16 38 93 43 or 07 180 72 72 5. Reach me and I'll answer all your questions regarding English language and also literature. Be blessed. Have a wonderful day. As you prepare for examination, let's make paper 1 easy to pass. Let's make paper 1 very enjoyable in tackling, and let's make it as nice as possible by creating a good environment through revision, through consultations, and through thorough research. A good student is a scholar, always on the research topics, always in the research books, always in the library, always with the teachers, always with the group discussions. You always want to know something new. English is sweet. English is so lovely. Bye. Enjoy the rest of your day.